Mr. President, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. At the outset, I would like to thank the SRSG, Ms. Ziada, for her comprehensive briefings. I also welcome the presence of His Excellency, Mr. Marko Duric, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Serbia, and Ms. Garvala Schwarz of Kosovo. I listened carefully both remarks, and I thank them for their remarks. We took note of the Secretary General's report and recognize the importance in maintaining peace and security and stability in the region. We acknowledge the ongoing efforts of all parties in pursuing dialogue and seeking constructive solutions to the outstanding issues. Our paramount importance is our steadfast support for the European Union facilitated dialogue, which remains the primary and most appropriate mechanism for addressing the outstanding issues between Belgrade and Pristina. This established framework provides the necessary structure for achieving sustainable solution through diplomatic means. We encourage all parties to engage constructively within the format and to implement existing agreements in good faith. In this context, we must emphasize the critical importance of refraining from unilateral actions or rhetorics that could adversely affect the situation on the ground, particularly in the northern Kosovo. Mr. President, recent developments in the region merit our careful consideration. Infrastructure challenges and community concerns affect daily life of all residents, underlining the importance of maintaining open channels of communication at all levels. In this context, the Council may wish to consider three observations. First, the importance of maintaining constructive dialogue through the established channels with full respect for existing agreements and arrangements. Second, the value of supporting confidence-building measures that can improve daily life for all communities. Third, the continuing relevance of regional cooperation in addressing the shared challenges. We support the United Nations effort aimed at fostering stability and promoting conditions conducive to the advancement of the meaningful dialogue. We acknowledge the vital role of Unmika under the leadership of SRSG, Ms. Ziada, in building trust and bridging divides between communities on the ground. Mr. President, moving forward, this Council unified support for diplomatic process remains essential. The international community stands ready to assist all parties in their efforts to find a mutually acceptable solutions through peaceful means. We encourage all stakeholders to prioritize engagement through the EU-facilitated dialogue to demonstrate restraint in both actions and rhetorics. Lasting stability requires not only patience and sustained commitment, but also wisdom to choose diplomatic engagement over unilateral measures. I thank you.
I thank the Permanent Representative of Somalia for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Panama. Thank you, President. Panama would like to welcome His Excellency Mr. Marko Duric, Foreign Affairs Minister of Serbia, and Her Excellency Tonika Kedvaja-Schwarz, the Foreign Affairs Minister of Kosovo, and Stavros Lambrinidis, Ambassador and Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations. Thank you all for being here. I would like to thank the Special Representative of the Secretary General and the Head of the United Nations Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo, Ms. Ziade, for the valuable briefing. We would also like to commend the Kosovo institutions upon the peaceful and transparent holding of the legislative elections of the 9th of February, and we would like to extend our sincere acknowledgements to the people of Kosovo, whose participation, above all of women and youth, showed their commitment to democracy and the future of their society. We wish to draw attention to the observations of the delegation of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which expressed its concern about the persistence of hate speech directed against women in Kosovo. At the same time, we recognize the efforts that have been made by Kosovo to address the state of affairs, particularly through initiatives such as the draft electoral law, which promotes transparency and also represents a significant step forward towards enhancing women's political participation. And it is the full and active participation of the entire population that is critical to bolster, rather than weaken, Kosovo's social fabric. That is why we express our full support to any measure that promotes inclusion and the human rights of all groups in Kosovo, and this includes minorities. On the other hand, when it comes to the latest events that the Secretary-General's report speaks to, we condemn the attack that occurred on the 29th of November on essential civilian infrastructure in the north of Kosovo. On the same track, we reiterate the importance for investigations to continue so that those responsible for this act be brought to justice, and the same goes for the attack on Kosovar police, which occurred in Banska in September 2023. Actions of this ilk do not just represent a direct threat to regional stability, they also undermine and hinder the possibilities and spaces for dialogue between the parties. That is why the entire international community should consider them to be unacceptable. On the other hand, in line with our position that regional organizations should play a critical role in dispute resolution, Panama reaffirms its support to the process of dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina, which the European Union is facilitating. This dialogue, provided that it is accompanied by the necessary political will from the parties, represents the most promising path towards peace, cooperation, and shared development for the region. Proof of this is the recent establishment of the Joint Commission on Missing Persons, which was established in the framework of this dialogue. We urge the parties to commit to working together to put dignity and reconciliation for the families of the missing persons above any kind of difference they may have. To conclude, President, a stable future will only be able to build between societies that can be strengthened through mutual understanding and respect. In this path, we need to maintain a strong commitment to stability, cohesion, and peace. That is why we reiterate that support from this Council to the UN Interim Administration Mission in Kosovo and the missions of the European Union on the ground remain critical to move towards peace building in the region. Thank you. I thank the representative of Panama. I now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the right. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I thank SRHG Ziade for her briefing, and we welcome both ministers in the chamber. At the outset, I want to commend Unmika, EULEX, and KFOR for their contributions to peace and stability in Kosovo. Mr. President, according to reports, the security situation in Kosovo remains calm, despite few serious incidents. I want to start with some encouraging and positive developments. Earlier in the year, Kosovo held peaceful, competitive, and inclusive parliamentary elections. This is a positive step forward in strengthening Kosovo's democratic credentials, and Slovenia very much welcomes it. In a similar vein, we also welcome the recent talks between the EU high officials and the political leaders in Kosovo and Serbia. We praise the reaffirmation of all sides to foster dialogue and support integration into the EU. We also recognize the establishment of the Joint Commission on Missing Persons. This is a positive step, and we call on both sides to swiftly commence the Commission's work and to continue taking forward-looking steps in other areas. Mr. President, our expectations for both sides remain high, and we believe that the year 2025 could and should mark a fresh start. First, on the continuation of the EU-facilitated dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina towards the normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo. This process needs to be furthered. We expect the leadership of both Serbia and Kosovo to address outstanding issues through constructive dialogue. Their leadership must work towards creating an environment of mutual trust and respect, with a focus on long-term stability and reconciliation. We also expect full implementation by both parties of agreements reached so far. Second, on de-escalation and reframing from unilateral actions. We expect the concerns of non-majority communities, particularly the Kosovo Serbs community, to be adequately addressed, especially regarding the closure of institutions providing essential services. We must ensure that the voices of communities, particularly non-majority groups, are well heard and their concerns addressed. Progress can only be achieved when all citizens are treated equally and with respect, and when all feel welcome in Kosovo. Kosovo's judicial institution must promote adequate representation of non-majority communities among judges, prosecutors, notaries, and other public law roles, in accordance with Kosovo's legal framework. Mr. President, we strongly condemn the attack on the Ibar Lepenac water canal last November and call for accountability of perpetrators. We expect the same for the attack in Banjska in September 23. Third, on inclusive governance and establishment of a future of mutual understanding, respect and progress in Kosovo. All political parties must recognize the importance of the aforementioned principles. The same expectations goes for the international community in Kosovo, which must continue investing in youth-led initiatives that promote dialogue, understanding, and collaboration across ethnic and political divides. The international community's support is also needed to ensure that UN peacekeeping operations, including Unmika, are regularly reviewed and, when necessary, adapted in terms of their strategic and operational tasks to reflect the evolving realities on the ground and thus better support long-term stability. Mr. President, if for no one else, it is for Kosovo youth that things need to start moving forward. They deserve a future shaped by shared values of respect, tolerance, and solidarity. It is time for the region to break free from the chains of the past and move forward. And with the strong support of the international community, it can be achieved. I thank you.
I thank the Permanent Representative of Slovenia for his statement, and I now give the floor to the Permanent Representative of Guyana.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I thank SRSG Ziade for her briefing. We also welcome the participation of His Excellency Mr. Marko Đurić, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Serbia, and Her Excellency Ms. Danica Drvala-Schwarz, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Diaspora of Kosovo, in today's meeting. We have listened carefully to their presentations. Mr. President, at the outset, I reiterate Guyana's firm support for the United Nations Administration Mission in Kosovo, Unmika, and its critical work to promote security, stability, and respect for human rights in Kosovo and the region. Guyana thanks the Secretary-General for his report on the activities of the mission for the period September 2024 to March 2025, and takes careful note of the key political developments. In this regard, we commend Kosovo for the peaceful elections held on February 9th, where women secured 37.5% of the seats in the legislature. We also took positive note of the new law on general elections, aimed at increasing transparency and promoting greater representation of women through the allocation of financial initiatives. However, we are concerned by the reports of harsh rhetoric, including hate speech, and attempts to politicize key institutions. We encourage the parties to work swiftly towards forming a new government and urge all political actors to be more responsible in their rhetoric and conduct. Responsible leadership and governance will be key in ensuring that both Kosovo and Serbia reaffirm their commitment to the European Union facilitated dialogue. While it is discouraging that the implementation of agreements for the normalization of relations have been stalled, we continue to believe that this mechanism remains the best avenue for achieving a just and lasting peace. We urge both Kosovo and Serbia to negotiate in good faith with the shared goal of preventing an escalation of tensions. We remain concerned about unilateral actions being taken by both sides, including actions that could cause harm to ethnic minority communities or that violate the parties' obligations under the EU-facilitated dialogue. We urge the relevant authorities to exercise restraint and avoid taking any actions that fuel mistrust. Addressing the concerns of non-majority communities and ensuring the protection of their economic and social rights is an obligation that all governments must uphold. Guyana condemns the 29th of November 2024 attack on the Ibar-Lepenac Canal and calls for a transparent and comprehensive investigation to be conducted and for those responsible to be held to account. We are encouraged by Unmika's activities geared towards promoting social cohesion in Kosovo. We commend SRSG Ziade and team for the initiatives undertaken through the Barbar Center and the UNMIC-supported projects held as a follow-up to the 6th UN Youth Assembly, all aimed at fostering dialogue, building trust among ethnically diverse communities, and fostering an inclusive society for all ethnic groups in Kosovo. In closing, Mr. President, Guyana reiterates her firm support and belief in a Europe that includes an independent, democratic Kosovo existing peacefully alongside Serbia. With leadership committed to respectful and constructive dialogue and the rejection of bellicose rhetoric, we can make progress toward a reality where all the peoples of both Serbia and Kosovo thrive in peace and prosperity. I thank you.
Je remercie Madame la représentante.
I thank the permanent representative of Guyana for her statement, and I give the floor to the permanent representative of the Russian Federation. Mr. President, we are grateful to the Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General, Caroline Ziada, for the briefing on the situation in the province and the assessments that have been shared. We welcome the participation of the Foreign Minister of Serbia, Marko Đurić, during this meeting. We have listened to Madam Donika Gevala-Schwarz, who yet again exercised in sharing lies, inaccurate assessments, and claims of geopolitical assertions. Next time, Mr. President, we will raise the question of the participation of this civilian in a meeting on Security Council Resolution 1244. Somebody should should brief the presidency not just on rules of participation in the meeting, but also rules of custom here. And decency, the rules of conduct and decency. And Madam Đurić portrayed a rosy picture of the situation in the province, this rosy so-called democracy. We shall see whether or not that is the case. The report of the Secretary General on the whole reflects a trend towards a significant escalation of the crisis in Kosovo. The main reasons have remained unchanged. They include Pristina's chauvinistic policy vis-à-vis the Serbian community, as well as the policy of a number of Western countries as they undermine the international legal basis for resolution. The document notes a large-scale liquidation of Serbian institutions in the province, incidents of desecration of Christian sites, expropriations of land, illegal detentions, as well as extrajudicial persecution of non-Albanian citizens. extrajudicial persecution of non-Albanian citizens. Let us note that the rampant lawlessness by the Pristina leadership is a continuation of its policy towards the expulsion of Serb residents. Other artificial problems remain unresolved. They include the establishment, the persistent prohibition on circulation of the Serbian dinar, obstacles to delivery of goods from central Serbia, growing crime against Serbians and their property, destructive activity of so-called mayors of the 4 northern municipalities, as well as obstacles to travel obstructions regarding travel to the province by representatives of Serbia and the Serb Orthodox Church, and attempts to restart vehicular transport along the bridge crossing the Ibar River in Kosovo Mitrovica. Under these circumstances, it is hardly surprising that the pace of the return of refugees and IDPs to the province remain exceedingly low. Over 6 months, only 55 people, 29 of them Serbs, have been. There is an ongoing exodus of the Serb population over the past 18 months. Approximately 20% of the Serbs residing there have left Kosovo. In order to reverse this negative trend, Belgrade has initiated the adoption of measures to support the most vulnerable non-Albanian residents of the province. We believe that this is a responsible approach which deserved full-fledged support. Still, there has been no investigation into the water canal attack in November 2024 in Zubin Potok. The leadership in Pristina, without any evidence at hand, as is their custom, has demonstrably shifted and pinned blame on the Serbs, capitalizing on the incident as a pretext to escalate repressions and to carry out brutal detentions. We have noted the positive assessment in the report regarding the conduct of 9 February elections in the so-called parliament in the province. And at the same time, what has been disregarded is the fact that there's been an exclusion of the leading party of Kosovo Serbs, the Serbian list, from observation mechanisms. Also disregarded were machinations during the vote, which led to a figure from the local Serb community under the control of the Kosovars being foisted onto the so-called assembly. Moreover, the report fails to contain any information whatsoever about sabotage by Pristina of the Brussels Agreement dating 2013 to 2015 with Belgrade on the establishment of the community of Serb-majority municipalities in Kosovo. Such actions undertaken by Kosovar Albanians fly in the face of what has been agreed upon in dialogue under the aegis of the U.S., and they render the negotiations process meaningless, and the mediators themselves are not helping either. Each unilateral step undertaken by Pristina is something which they meet with purely formalistic condemnations, addressing their calls to exercise restraint to both sides. Essentially, the proposal to Belgrade is to accept the fait accompli. At the same time, we are shocked by the obstinate nature with which EU representatives are advancing the Brussels-Ohrid understanding dating February-March 2023, which merely exists on paper. Let us recall that the aim of this verbal understanding is to prompt Belgrade to engage and initiate the de facto recognition of Kosovar pseudo-independence. And this yet again attests to the inability of Brussels to act as an honest broker. Let us recall that in 2008, the United Nations Security Council supported the Secretary General's proposal for the EU to play a greater role in Kosovar settlement, fully in accordance with Security Council Resolution 1244. 17 years have elapsed. Subsequently, in 2010, the General Assembly welcomed the willingness of Brussels to facilitate dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. 15 years have elapsed. An analysis of the current situation clearly shows that the EU is not in a position to influence Pristina in any way. Albin Kurti openly stated during the campaign that he had no intention whatsoever to establish the community of Serb-majority municipalities in Kosovo. Brussels' position, as it obstinately disregards the tragedy of anti-Serb ethnic cleansings in Kosovo, incites the local self-governing bodies in Pristina Pristina and to continue to oppress the Serb population. EU mediation has completely failed. We fail to understand why the EU delegation, under these circumstances, is requested to participate in this meeting of the Security Council, clearly as a reminder of their existence through the authority of the Security Council to attempt to burnish their own authority, an image which lies in tatters when it comes to the question of resolution. Paradoxical as it may seem, instead of resolving the main problems plaguing the province, the Pristina regime's efforts and those of its NATO patrons are geared towards, on the contrary, exacerbating those issues. An announcement was made about a transition to the final stage of the so-called establishment of the so-called Kosovo army. There are ongoing deliveries of material from NATO countries. We are talking about drones, armored vehicles, anti-tank systems, artillery pieces, as well as other weaponry. There are plans to procure air defense systems, as well as helicopter gunships. Foundations are being established for a local defense industry. The foundation is being established for a local defense industry. This is all an egregious breach of Security Council Resolution 1244. We are particularly concerned by the signing on 18 March by Zagreb, Tirana, and Pristina. They signed a joint declaration on some kind of cooperation in the area of defense. And at the same time, the so-called Premier Alban Kurti openly talks about the anti-Serb focus of this alliance and is championing dangerous Greater Albanian rhetoric. Furthermore, he is announcing a sharp increase in the military budget, cynically emphasizing the succession between the so-called Kosovo security forces and the former terrorist Kosovo Liberation Army, whose leaders are presently on trial at The Hague. We trust that the special court established there will fulfill its tasks to see to it that all perpetrators of the crimes be duly punished. Mr. President, we believe that in order to stabilize the situation in the province, Pristina needs, as soon as possible, to lift the discriminatory decision against the Serb population and for its Western patrons to revisit its approaches towards militarization of the province and Kosovo's settlement as a whole. Specifically, it is past time to propel the wayward regime of establishing a community of Serb-majority municipalities in Kosovo, as was enshrined more than 10 years ago in the Brussels agreements. One wonders whether we will hear from the EU representative about what real steps they intend to undertake to break this deadlock. The facts we have voiced today further reaffirm the need to keep the situation in Kosovo on the agenda of the Security Council, regardless of attempts by representatives and patrons of the Pristina regime to persuade us of the opposite, especially given that this situation is clearly at odds with the rosy picture which representatives of Pristina once again are trying to persuade us of. Instead, we would like to hear from Madam Gervalla Schwartz about what steps were undertaken to hold Kosovo Albanians accountable, those responsible for the assault on 28 May 2019, the assault of an Unmika staff member, Mikhail Krasnashokov. We would like to have clarification and explanation regarding the illegitimate designation as a persona non grata of staff member Andrei Antonov in 2021. As we know, Pristina has no authority to expel Unmika staff. Mr. President, in the light of the lack of progress in resolution, the focus of the international community's attention on Kosovo should not wane. We categorically object to reducing the frequency and change in the form of Security Council meetings on the Kosovo issue, and we also object to the reduction of the budget and staffing for Unmika. We support the prompt achievement by Belgrade and Pristina of the lasting, mutually acceptable resolution on the basis of Security Council Resolution 1244. This is the only possible solution, and this needs to be endorsed by the Council. Thank you.
Je remercie Monsieur le représentant permanent de la
I thank the permanent representative of the Russian Federation for a statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. And thank you, Special Representative Ziadeh, for your briefing. I also recognize the presence of and remarks from the Kosovar Foreign Minister. Madam SRSG, we recognize your leadership and Unmik's past efforts in Kosovo to foster dialogue and legal reform. But the time to draw down Unmik has arrived. We recommend Unmik begin transferring its functions to other UN agencies on the ground better suited for this work, so the process toward ultimately terminating the mission is deliberate and gradual rather than sudden. The United States is committed to rooting out unnecessary spending in international organizations. Unmik is a peacekeeping mission without peacekeepers, with 81% of its budget going to staff salaries, even as the mission has long outlived its original mandate. The United States calls on fellow council members to revisit Unmik's mandate so we may together commence an orderly winding down of its operations. The time to begin this transition is overdue. As we have said before, Unmik no longer has a role in the governance of Kosovo, and the mission remains oversourced and overstaffed. With respect to future meetings on Unmik, we strongly urge they may be closed-door meetings, as a closed format would foster a more candid and less performative discussion. We also believe these briefings should be further reduced to annual meetings, given the demands on the Security Council's time. Kosovo and Serbia must work to lower tensions, refrain from escalatory measures, and build peace and stability between them and within the broader region as a foundation for a more prosperous future. The ultimate goal must be for mutual recognition. Normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia is essential to stability in the Western Balkans. America and the global community are safer when countries resolve their conflicts peacefully, and more prosperous when they create the climate for expanding international trade and investment. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. I thank the representative of the United States as the president, and I give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. I welcome the presence of His Excellency Mr. Marko Đurić, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Serbia. I also thank SRSG Caroline Ziadeh for her briefing. I listened carefully to the remarks made by Ms. Donika Garvela Schwartz. I would like at the outset to take good note of the organization of legislative elections last February, an important poll that has been conducted peacefully and without major incidents. In this regard, we welcome women's representation in the new assembly with more than 37% of the seats. I would like also to note the progress made through the European Union facilitated dialogue in advancing the implementation of agreements between the two parties. However, we regretfully note that key areas of the 2023 agreements on the path to normalization of relations and its implementation annex remain outstanding. We also regret the continued unilateral actions undertaken by authorities in Kosovo, including the closure of Serbia-run institutions delivering essential services to Kosovo Serbs. Furthermore, we note with concern the attack in Zubin Potok municipality, which seriously damaged the canal supplying drinking water to several towns and cooling the main power plants in Kosovo. Such acts not only weaken security and raise tensions, but also undermine the much-needed trust for advancing the normalization process between the parties. Against this backdrop, I would like to stress the following. First, maintaining peace and security in Kosovo is critical to avoid any escalation of tensions. It is important in this regard to refrain from taking any steps that could lead to escalation, including unilateral actions that affect the socio-economic situation of non-majority communities. It is also important to conduct a comprehensive and transparent investigation to hold those responsible for the water canal attack accountable. Second, building trust among communities is vital for creating an environment conducive to dialogue. In this vein, we stress once again the need to undertake the necessary measures to establish the long-awaited association community of Serb municipalities. Equally important is the need to ensure adequate representation of Kosovo Serbs and other minorities in local and judicial institutions. Third, we appreciate the vital role of Unmika under the leadership of the Special Representative of the Secretary General, Ms. Caroline Ziada. We encourage the mission to continue its effort and engagement with all stakeholders to promote security, stability, and respect of human rights in Kosovo. Fourth, we call upon the parties to strengthen their engagement in the EU-facilitated dialogue and to uphold their commitment to implementing all the agreements in this framework. Diplomacy and negotiations are key to reaching a just and peaceful solution that guarantees a prosperous future for all. Finally, Algeria reiterates its support for all efforts toward a mutually acceptable solution in line with the UN Security Council Resolution 1244 and with full respect for the principles enshrined in the UN Charter. And then thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le...
I thank the representative of Algeria for the statement. I give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also thank Ms. Caroline Ziade, Special Representative and Head of Unmika, for her comprehensive briefing. Sierra Leone welcomes the participation of His Excellency Mr. Marko Đurić, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Serbia, Ms. Donika Gavala-Schwartz, and His Excellency Mr. Stavros Lambrinidis, Head of the Delegation of the European Union to the United Nations. We take note of the Secretary General's report, as well as the European Union Rule of Law Mission report. Sierra Leone commends the collective efforts of all actors on the ground, local political authorities, civil society, and international partners who are working tirelessly to advance Kosovo's stability and development. We welcome the successful elections held earlier this year in February, particularly commending the consultative approach employed leading up to the elections. The certification of the election results presents a critical opportunity to restore trust in governing institutions and contribute to building an inclusive and peaceful society for Kosovo's multi-ethnic people. We hope this spirit continues in the forthcoming mayoral elections in the 4 municipalities of North Kosovo. We commend the progress achieved through the EU-facilitated dialogue and the establishment of the Joint Commission on Missing Persons. This step is essential in advancing peace-building efforts, fostering reconciliation, and addressing the human consequences of conflict, thus paving the way for a more just and sustainable peace. Sierra Leone, however, remains concerned about the excessive presence and conduct of police forces, particularly in northern Kosovo. Democracy, human rights, and the rule of law are interdependent, and the erosion of one threatens the others. In light of recent reports, we urge a swift, impartial, and thorough investigation into these incidents. Mr. President, the EU accession path remains the most viable route for Kosovo's development, and the terms of the implementation annex cannot be bypassed. We reiterate our call for deeper cooperation between Belgrade and Pristina to ensure the full implementation of the Ohrid Agreement. Given the escalating tensions and socioeconomic stagnation in the Western Balkans, which risk sparking conflict with potential spillover effects, we propose the following measures to support peace building, stability, and the continued implementation of the agreement. First, we urge both parties to recognize that failure to comply with the terms of the agreement will have negative consequences for all involved. We call for the full and good faith implementation of the agreement without selectivity to ensure comprehensive progress, particularly in the context of EU accession. The lack of progress in establishing the association community of Serb majority municipalities is concerning, particularly as the welfare of some communities in Kosovo is being adversely affected by Kosovo authorities shutting down Serbia-run administrative services, especially those related to social welfare. We note Belgrade's commitment in this regard and urge Pristina to take immediate decisive action to address the challenges faced by these communities. Protection of human rights must be prioritized, and the concerns of these communities should not be overshadowed by the need for state control. Second, while the security situation appears stable, peace remains fragile. We're deeply concerned by incidents of violence resulting in damage to critical infrastructure and property. Sierra Leone condemns all forms of violence, particularly acts of terror, intimidation, and hate, which have occurred in certain areas. Divisive rhetoric, including hate speech directed at women in politics, is unacceptable and must not be tolerated as a means of expressing dissent or dissatisfaction. We recognize the invaluable role of civil society organizations and urge authorities to engage in dialogue and take swift action to investigate and hold accountable those responsible for these incidents, including those in Banjska in 2023. We also acknowledge the efforts of Unmika in fostering trust between communities and advancing the women and youth peace and security agenda. Third, building a society that reflects and serves the needs of all of Kosovo's diverse people cannot happen in isolation. It requires the active participation of all community members at every level. We welcome the Kosovo Judicial Council and the Kosovo Prosecutorial Council's efforts to include judges, prosecutors, and support staff from the Kosovo Serb and non-majority communities. We encourage further efforts to ensure meaningful representation, which fosters trust, understanding, and challenges negative perceptions. This approach empowers marginalized groups and contributes to a more equitable and vibrant society. We also urge cooperation from these groups to integrate their unique perspectives and cultural experiences into Kosovo's governance and administration. In closing, Mr. President, Sierra Leone commends the Specialist Chambers and the Specialist Prosecutor's Office for their progress in bringing perpetrators to justice and providing redress to victims. While acknowledging the critical role of UN-led and other international post-conflict interventions, we believe the stability of Kosovo ultimately rests in the hands of its people. Sierra Leone therefore echoes the Secretary General's call for both parties to reaffirm their commitment to the European Union facilitated dialogue and to address outstanding issues constructively and in good faith within the framework of the dialogue. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone. I now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
I also thank Special Representative Siade for her briefing, and let me also welcome the foreign ministers of Serbia and Kosovo for today's briefings, as well as the head of the EU delegation, Ambassador Lambrinidis. Denmark is a long-standing supporter on peace and stability in Kosovo, not just in words, but in deed. Since 1999, more than 10,000 Danish soldiers have served in Kosovo. That support continues to this day. We were also among the first countries to recognize Kosovo as an independent state. We fully support its European path and integration into the international system. Mr. President, it has been more than 25 years since the horrific conflict in Kosovo ended. Significant steps have been taken since then. Denmark commends Kosovo for these achievements, as well as Unmika for its important and long-lasting work in cooperation with KFOR, EU-LEX, and other international partners. Across UN peace operations, we need to ensure that the mission mandates reflect the reality on the ground. Denmark is, therefore, open to dialogue and a possible strategic review that could be useful for Unmika's future efforts. We also commend the Kosovo institution for the peaceful conduct of recent legislative elections that were inclusive and competitive. Despite positive developments, challenges do remain. I would like to make 3 points. First, a normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia is essential. Steps to that end will pave the way towards a stable, secure, and prosperous region. The EU-facilitated dialogue offers the only viable path forward. We welcome the progress achieved during the recent reporting period, including on the establishment of the Joint Commission on Missing Persons. We encourage both parties to continue to engage constructively, fulfill their obligations under all existing agreements, and seek compromise. In this regard, it is crucial that Kosovo establishes an association of Serb-majority municipalities, and that Serbia does not oppose Kosovo's membership of international organizations. We welcome the new EU Special Representative, Peter Sørensen, and his efforts to continue taking the dialogue forward. Second, Mr. President, we are concerned about the fragile security situation in northern Kosovo. We regret that numerous incidents continue to generate tensions between Kosovo Serbs and the Kosovo authorities. We discourage unilateral action that heighten tensions, jeopardize trust, and impact the daily lives of individuals, in particular of non-majority communities. Better coordination and engagement with the communities is crucial and in line with the multi-ethnic version of Kosovo. The attacks against KFOR personnel and the violent attack in Banjka in 2023 are still clear and serious reminders of the continued and pressing need to de-escalate tensions. It is important that the perpetrators are identified and, importantly, face justice. We deeply regret that Serbia has not taken sufficient steps in that regard. We also strongly condemn the more recent attack on the Ibar-Lipnac water canal in November 2024. Third, Mr. President, building trust is key to lasting peace. Healing the scars of conflict takes commitment and time. The political leaders from both sides have an important role to play. They need to set an example of mutual understanding and cooperation between the communities. Importantly, they should refrain from stoking tensions and engaging in divisive and inflammatory rhetoric. Let me also highlight that Kosovo has the youngest population in Europe. Ensuring good inter-ethnic relations between the young people in Kosovo is of paramount importance. We need to include young people in shaping the peace that ultimately they will inherit. We commend the work of Unmika in this regard. Mr. President, to conclude, now is the time to consolidate the positive developments and to refrain from actions that serve only to heighten tensions. 2025 offers a new opportunity for progress. Denmark stands ready to support both parties, Unmika, and any initiatives to that end. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark. I now give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me start by thanking SRSG and head of Unmika for an informative briefing. I also welcome the presence of the ministers from Serbia and Kosovo, as well as the participation of the head of the delegation of the European Union at today's meeting. Mr. President, Greece commends the commitment of Unmika and personally SRSG Mrs. Ziadeh to promoting security, stability and respect for the rule of law and protection of human rights in Kosovo. The presence of UN signals a long-lasting engagement to the well-being, peaceful coexistence and reconciliation of all communities. The Unmika mandate, in accordance with Security Council Resolution 1244 of 1999, is interlinked with the normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo and a final political settlement. Greece supports the continuation of its mandate as necessary. Unmika coordination with KFOR and ULEX in Kosovo is vital for achieving long-lasting solution and embedding peace and stability in the region. Mr. President, there is now an absolute need to move forward with the normalization process of bilateral relations between Serbia and Kosovo. Both sides must remain fully engaged with the EU-facilitated dialogue and must work ardently for the full implementation of the Brussels-Ohrid agreements. It is of paramount importance that both parties demonstrate the willingness to achieve progress in the dialogue and exercise utmost restraint in avoiding actions which trigger tensions and aggravate the situation on the ground. The renewed European Union integration prospects of the Western Balkans, and Serbia and Kosovo in particular, remains the main anchor of stability and prosperity for both sides and the region as a whole. We welcome the appointment of Mr. Peter Sørensen as EU Special Representative for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, and we express our strong support to his tasks in this regard. We also welcome the compromise reached by Serbia and Kosovo on the terms of reference for the Joint Commission of Missing Persons last December as a positive development towards reconciliation and mutual trust, and encourage further progress in this respect. Mr. President, Although we recognize that both sides have undertaken positive steps towards the direction of the normalization of bilateral relations, we cannot ignore that divisive rhetoric is dominant in public speech, undermining the progress which has been achieved throughout the years. Greece deplores the increase of unilateral actions taken in northern Kosovo. The situation remains volatile, and we are deeply concerned about uncoordinated actions which endanger regional stability. At the same time, the status of Serbian parallel structure must be resolved within the framework of the EU-facilitated dialogue through the establishment of the Association Community of Serb-majority municipalities. The rights of the Kosovo Serbs must be fully respected, including the rights to active participation in local governments, policing and judiciary. We further call for the return of Kosovo Serbs police officers, judges and prosecutors to the institutions of Kosovo. We strongly condemn the Banjka attack of 2023, as well as the attack of the Ibar-Lepenac water canal of last November. The perpetrators of these violent acts must be brought to justice in a transparent manner and in full respect of the rule of law principle. Furthermore, unproportionate deployment of Kosovo police forces in northern Kosovo as a response to peaceful process is deeply alarming. We repeat our call for restraint and unconditional respect for human rights and freedoms of all communities in Kosovo. Mr. President, trust and reconciliation remain at the core of the process for the normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo. The role of women and youth in this process is essential for building the necessary bonds between communities, inclusive initiatives, as well as projects for combating violence of all forms against women, remains a central part of the reconciliation path. Moreover, efforts must be accelerated in advancing the return of refugees and displaced persons in a secure environment. Property rights must also be fully protected. In closing, Mr. President, let me reiterate that Greece remains a staunch supporter of the EU perspective of the Western Balkans, our immediate neighborhood. Since the Thessaloniki Declaration of the EU-Western Balkans Summit of 2003, the key principles and foundation of the European integration process remain unchanged and provides a shared, future-oriented European vision based on the values of democracy, rule of law, respect of human and minority rights, solidarity and respect for international law, including the violability of borders. Dialogue and peaceful resolution of conflicts is the only way forward for safeguarding stability and prosperity for the entire Western Balkan regions. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for that statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by thanking the Special Representative and her team for all the work they're doing in Kosovo and for the briefing today. And let me welcome the Foreign Ministers of Serbia and Kosovo to the Chamber, as well as the delegation of the European Union. Mr. President, the UK is a long-standing friend of Kosovo. We remain committed to supporting Kosovo's Euro-Atlantic aspirations and its development of an inclusive and multi-ethnic democracy. During his visit to Kosovo last week, the UK's Foreign Secretary reaffirmed our commitment to that goal. We welcome Kosovo's recent elections. These were assessed by international observers as peaceful and competitive. The UK looks forward to working closely with whoever forms the next government. As a strong supporter of Kosovo's statehood, we welcome Kenya's recent recognition of Kosovo, adding to the many countries recognising Kosovo across the globe. We encourage those who have yet to recognise Kosovo's independence to do so. Mr. President, while the Secretary-General's report rightly points out the pressure felt by many Kosovo Serbs, we also welcome actions that have been taken to improve community relations, such as Kosovo's successful efforts to recruit police officers from non-majority communities. We regret, however, that no judges or prosecutors from non-majority communities have, to our knowledge, asked to be considered for reintegration into the Kosovo institutions. And we look forward to active participation of Kosovo Serbs in peaceful municipal elections during the next reporting period. More broadly, Mr. President, we encourage Serbia and Kosovo to engage constructively with the EU Special Representative Peter Sorensen to reach a comprehensive and legally binding normalisation agreement through full implementation by both sides of the Brussels and Ohrid agreements. We strongly encourage Serbia to bring to justice without further delay those responsible for the 2023 attacks on KFOR troops and in Banjka, and to fulfil its pledge to cooperate in the investigation of the attack on the Iber-Lepench Canal. I I would like to end by expressing the UK's gratitude to the Special Representative and all mission staff who've contributed to Unmik's work. However, with conditions on the ground now unrecognisable from 1999, as we've said before, we believe it's time for the Council to review Unmik's role and responsibilities to ensure it can continue to effectively support security, stability and human rights in Kosovo in a way that reflects the world of 2025. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom. I now give the floor to the representative of China.
President, I welcome the presence of Serbian Foreign Minister Đurić at today's meeting. I have listened carefully to the briefing by SRSG Ziade. I wish to make the following points. First, in the recent period, the Kosovo authorities have forced the closure of a number of Serbian-run institutions, repeatedly violated the security of the Serbs, encroached on and squeezed their living space, and triggered tensions on the ground. China expresses its grave concern in this regard. We urge the Kosovo authorities to stop these erroneous moves, to earnestly respect and safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of the Serb community, and to reduce ethnic tensions. Second, in recent years, the Kosovo authorities have taken a series of unilateral actions, such as the mandatory requirements regarding ID cards and vehicle license plates, the insistence on holding municipal elections in 4 northern cities, the ban of the Serbian currency dinar, the violent searches targeting Serbs in northern Kosovo, and the push for opening Ibar River Bridge, which have frequently created trouble and led to continued tensions and volatility in northern Kosovo. We urge the Kosovo authorities to stop unilateral actions, to return to the right track of dialogue and consultation, and to work with parties concerned to maintain peace and stability on the ground. Third, last November, an explosion occurred at a water canal in northern Kosovo. The SRSG and the international community have called for a comprehensive investigation. Serbia has expressed its readiness to provide support for the investigation at any time. We urge the Kosovo authorities to conduct a transparent and impartial investigation into the incident and to avoid a hasty characterization that could once again escalate tensions and intensify confrontation. Fourth, the coexistence of multi-ethnic communities in Kosovo is shaped by history. Tolerance, reconciliation, and harmonious coexistence among communities serves the long-term and fundamental interests of all parties. The 2013 Brussels Agreement should be effectively observed. The establishment of the Association of Serb-majority municipalities is an important element of the agreement and a key obstacle in the current dialogue process between the two sides. We urge the Kosovo authorities to implement it as soon as possible through concrete actions. Fifth, the European Union has long been working to promote a settlement of the Kosovo issue. We hope that the EU will maintain an objective and a neutral position and use its good offices in a fair and impartial manner. We hope that the parties will engage with the new special representative for the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue in discussions on a political settlement of the Kosovo issue. Sixth, AMIC plays an important role in maintaining stability and promoting national reconciliation. The United Nations and the Security Council should continue to maintain their attention to and input in the Kosovo issue. All parties concerned should also support AMIC in full implementation of its mandate and support the work of SRSG Ziade. President, China's position on the Kosovo issue is consistent and clear. We support the parties concerned within the framework of Security Council Resolution 1244 in reaching a mutually acceptable solution through dialogue and consultation. In this process, the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of Serbia should be fully respected. I wish to emphasize that the countries and peoples of the Balkans have suffered too much from wars and conflicts. All parties should draw lessons from history and work together to prevent the Balkans from being plunged into turmoil again. China stands ready to work with all parties concerned to continue to promote enhanced dialogue and engagement and peaceful coexistence among ethnic communities of the region and the early political settlement of the Kosovo issue. Thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for that statement. I now give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me to begin by also thanking SRSG Caroline Siade for her detailed briefing. I would also like to welcome Foreign Minister Marko Đurić of Serbia and Foreign Minister Donika Švarc of Kosovo to this meeting. At the outset, I would like to reaffirm my country's earnest desire to see peace and stability prevail in the region. We commend the SRSG and her team for their efforts in pursuance of their mandate, particularly in facilitating intercommunal and inter-ethnic trust building and in countering divisive narratives through dialogue and projects that help promote harmony, reconciliation, and understanding among Kosovo's diverse communities. Given the region's complex history, this work is of fundamental importance. Mr. President, I would also like to take this opportunity to congratulate the government of Kosovo and its Central Election Commission for the successful conduct of the legislative elections on 9th February, which, according to observer reports, were peaceful, inclusive, and participatory. Mr. President, my delegation remains convinced that a constructive and sustained dialogue is the only path toward lasting peace, stability, and tranquility in the region. The 2013 Brussels Agreement and the 2023 Agreement on the path to normalization between Kosovo and Serbia provide a solid framework and a foundation for the two sides to move in the direction of normalization of their relations and for advancing mutual understanding, peaceful coexistence, and development for the peoples of the region. We appreciate the European Union's continued efforts to facilitate dialogue and call upon both Belgrade and Pristina to demonstrate sincere commitment to the political process, earnestly fulfill their respective obligations and commitments under the aforementioned agreements, and refrain from unilateral actions that could escalate tensions. Mr. President, the prevalent tense situation in northern Kosovo is a matter of concern. The attack on the Iber-Lipenj Canal, along with other acts of violence targeting police and other government buildings, are deeply troubling and condemnable. The perpetrators of these attacks, including the Bansk attack of 2023, should be brought to justice swiftly in accordance with the rule of law. We are equally disturbed by reports of targeted attacks on religious sites, including the desecration of Serbian Orthodox churches in various localities in Kosovo. Such acts are deplorable and must be addressed with utmost seriousness. Mr. President, both Kosovo and Serbia are friends of Pakistan. When we discuss this issue, we are reminded of the tragic past, and while being mindful of the complexities that need to be understood and addressed, we also see the imperative of looking forward to a peaceful and harmonious future. In that context, in concluding, I would like to once again reiterate that peace and stability in Kosovo and the prosperity and well-being of all its people, and indeed the wider region, can only be achieved through a steadfast commitment to dialogue and diplomacy, and by avoiding divisive political rhetoric, by addressing outstanding issues and adopting a constructive and mutually respectful approach that would lead us to lasting peace. That is the shared objective of this Council and I believe the international community. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for his statement. I now give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me begin by expressing my appreciations to SRSG Jiade for her comprehensive and timely briefing. The Republic of Korea also welcomes His Excellency Mr. Marko Dric, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Serbia, and Her Excellency Ms. Tunika Gervala-Schwarz, Deputy Prime Minister of Kosovo, to the Council. Mr. President, the Republic of Korea remains steadfast in its support for peace, reconciliation, and prosperity in the Western Balkans. We reaffirm our consistent positions. The normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo must be pursued exclusively through peaceful means, through political dialogue and negotiation within the framework of EU facilitated process. Despite some encouraging developments since the 2023 agreement, the situation remains fragile. As reflected in the Secretary General's latest report, provocative unilateral actions and inflammatory rhetoric, particularly in the lead-up to the legislative elections in Kosovo, have exacerbated divisions, eroded mutual trust, and hindered the normalization process. We are particularly concerned by incidents that threaten stability and affect the daily lives of vulnerable communities. These include the closure of Serbian-run institutions in Kosovo, the attack on the Bar Lepenak water canal, damaging the critical infrastructure for ethnic Serbian communities, and the recent grenade attack on a Kosovo post office in Zvečan. Such actions undermine efforts toward the peace and must be condemned. All parties must refrain from unilateral measures and avoid the statements that could further inflame tensions. The violent attack against the Kosovo police in Banska in 2023 remains unresolved, highlighting the pressing need for a transparent investigation and the rule of law to prevail. Accountability is essential to rebuilding trust and ensuring justice. In this regard, we welcome the establishment of the Joint Commission on Missing Persons as a constructive and confidence-building step. Trust building among parties to a conflict takes time and requires patience. Addressing the painful issue of missing persons may seem small, but it is deeply meaningful efforts that can serve as a cornerstone of conflict resolution. We hope that both sides will engage in good faith and that the mechanism will contribute meaningfully to truth, justice, and reconciliation. Furthermore, we commend the peaceful conduct of Kosovo's recent legislative elections and welcome the significant participation of women and youth. Mr. President, the Republic of Korea shares the Secretary General's assessment that sustainable peace in Kosovo depends on inclusive dialogue, trust building, and protection of human rights. The meaningful participation of all communities and the safeguarding of the economic and social rights of vulnerable groups must remain a priority. In this regard, we reaffirm our strong support for the EU's facilitation efforts and underlines the vital role played by Unmika in coordination with KFOR, ULEX, and other partners. We hope that Unmik's engagement will continue to contribute to strengthening stability and fostering inter-community trust, which together form the foundation of a peaceful and inclusive society. At the same time, a more streamlined division of roles could enhance overall effectiveness, as some of Unmik's initial functions have been assumed by other institutions. With serious conflicts ongoing around the world, we sincerely hope that this region does not further deteriorate into a protracted or intractable conflict. The Republic of Korea stands ready to contribute to international efforts aimed at advancing the region's path toward a peaceful coexistence. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Korea for his statement, and I will now deliver a statement in my capacity as the representative of France. I thank the special representative, Madame Caroline Ziadeh, for her presentation. I wish to assure her France's full support as she discharges her duties. I welcome the presence of His Excellency Mr. Marko Đurić, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Serbia, and Her Excellency Madame Donika Jerevala-Švarc, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Kosovo. France applauds the conduct of parliamentary elections in Kosovo on 9 February. The elections were carried out without any major security incident. They were both competitive and inclusive, as was reported by the EU Electoral Observation Mission. France applauds the participation of the Serbs of Kosovo. We hope that a government will be expeditiously constituted in order to make progress in the implementation of the Brussels-Ohrid Accords, which are a priority. Serbia and Kosovo are aware of France's steadfast commitment alongside Germany to help normalize the relations. Normalization is a sine qua non for the integration into the European Union, to which the peoples of the two countries aspire. On the 1st of February last, Mr. Peter Sorensen was appointed a new special representative of the European Union, tasked with facilitating dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. He has been tasked with generating new momentum for dialogue in order to reach an agreement to in a lasting and definitive way resolve the disputes between the two countries. This is also the goal sought by the Security Council. In order to achieve this normalization, France urges Serbia and Kosovo to honor the commitments assumed under the Brussels-Ohrid agreements. On 15 January, the Kosovo government announced, however, the closure of Serb administrative structures in Kosovo. This decision is to the detriment of the daily lives of the Serbs in Kosovo. We deplore this unilateral action when we recall that the status of Serb structures needs to be resolved through the establishment of the Association of Serb Majority municipalities on the basis of the European Draft Statute. France will continue to monitor the status of the Serb population in Kosovo. Preservation of the multi-ethnic nature of Kosovo society requires an establishment of representative democracy in the north of Kosovo. We call on the Serbs in Kosovo to resume their active participation in local governance, maintenance of public order, and the judicial system. Furthermore, it is unacceptable that the perpetrators of the Banska attack remain at large. They need to be held accountable. France condemns the attack, which took place on 29 October 2024 against the Iber-Lepenc Canal, and we urge the parties to shed full light on the circumstances of the attack. We applaud the Serb president's commitment to supporting the investigations. We invite the Serb authorities to fully cooperate with the European Union Judicial Assistance Mechanism. Lastly, France applauds the efforts of Unmika in reinforcing rule of law, respect for human rights, as well as intercommunal reconciliation in Kosovo. These efforts to rebuild trust, particularly vis-à-vis young people, are vital for stability and security in Kosovo. I applaud, for example, the activities carried out at the Barabar Center in Pristina to foster intercommunal dialogue in a spirit of recognition and mutual respect. UNMIK, KFOR, and ULEX Kosovo are operating in complementarity. Their combined efforts present a model for cooperation for the benefit of the people of Kosovo as well as the stability of the country in the Balkans. UNMIK's mandate is linked to a normalization of relations between Serbia and Kosovo, and France supports the extension thereof on behalf of peace and reconciliation in the Balkans, on behalf of the conviction of a peaceful cohabitation among communities, and on behalf of the European aspiration of the peoples in the region. I thank you, and I now resume my duties as the President of the Council. I give the floor to the representative of the United States.
Président, and my apologies for retaking the floor. However, I did realize that, or I do realize that I read my remarks a little too quickly and inadvertently neglected to acknowledge the presence of the Serbian foreign minister, and that was simply an oversight on my part, and I do apologize, Foreign Minister Duric. My apologies. Thank you, sir.
I thank the representative of the United States for the clarification, and I now give the floor to His Excellency, the head of the delegation of the European Union to the United Nations.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of the European Union and its member states, the candidate countries North Macedonia, Montenegro, Albania, the Republic of Moldova, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as Andorra, align themselves with this statement. And like others in this room, let me thank the SRSG for her briefing and the two ministers for their presence. Colleagues, the European Union and the Western Balkans share a common future and face urgent challenges that we can only overcome together. We owe it to our citizens to build a future of peace and prosperity based on shared principles and values and common interests. The future of the Western Balkans is in our European Union. We once again reconfirm our full and unequivocal commitment to the European Union membership perspective of the Western Balkans. President, the United Nations General Assembly welcomed the readiness of the European Union to facilitate a process of dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia. The European Union welcomes that Serbia and Kosovo reaffirmed their commitment to the EU-facilitated dialogue and the process of normalization of their relations and pledged constructive engagement in the process to move it forward quickly. We reiterate that the agreement on the path to normalization between Kosovo and Serbia and its implementation annex, adopted in February and March 2023, respectively, must be fully respected and implemented as soon as possible without preconditions, as all EU-related commitments, along with other pending commitments reached in the EU-facilitated dialogue led by the High Representative Kaja Kallas and supported by the EU Special Representative Peter Sorensen. This includes the establishment of the Association Community of Serb-majority municipalities in Kosovo. And Serbia is expected to initiate the recognition of Kosovo's documents and symbols. The European Union remains deeply concerned about the situation in the north of Kosovo. Kosovo and Serbia must pursue sustained de-escalation efforts, refrain from unilateral and provocative actions that could lead to tensions and violence, and avoid divisive rhetoric. Furthermore, we reiterate that the status of Serbia-supported structures and services is foreseen to be resolved in line with agreements reached in the EU-facilitated dialogue and Kosovo law. We call on Kosovo to enable the reintegration of Kosovo Serb judges, prosecutors, police officers, and other personnel into all Kosovo institutions they left in 2022. The Council of the European Union has expressed its expectation that the reintegration will be done without preconditions by Serbia, in accordance with dialogue agreements and with full respect for Kosovo's legal framework. Allow me to also reiterate the European Union's expectations that Serbia will fully cooperate and take all the necessary measures to apprehend and urgently bring to justice the perpetrators of the 2023 attack in the north of Kosovo. In this context, allow me to underline the need for full accountability and that we deeply regret that Serbia has taken insufficient actions in this respect. President, the European Union recalls the importance of Kosovo's close cooperation with the EULEX mission, as well as other relevant international actors. We reiterate the importance of and our support for the work of the Kosovo Specialist Chambers and the Special Prosecutor's Office, and we underline our readiness to assist them in the implementation of their mandate. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, the European Union wishes to welcome the elections held in February 2025. Elections that were held without incident with the participation of all communities under a new electoral law regime in Kosovo, with the implementation of the recommendations of the previous mission of the European Union. We invite all the deputies of the Parliamentary Assembly of Kosovo, with the community of Serbs of Kosovo, to participate actively and constructively in the proceedings of the Assembly. It is critical for this autumn for inclusive municipal elections to be held with the full participation of the Serbs of Kosovo without preconditions in the 4 municipalities of the north.
President, in conclusion, the European Union expects Serbia and Kosovo to engage in good faith in the EU-facilitated dialogue on a comprehensive, legally binding agreement on normalization of relations in accordance with international law and EU law without further delay. Normalization of relations and implementing their dialogue commitments are essential conditions on the European path of both parties, and both risk losing important opportunities in absence of progress. Finally, it bears repeating, as I underlined at the start of this intervention, that the European Union and the Western Balkans share a common future. Even as we face urgent challenges, we can and will only overcome these together. Merci beaucoup.